I would never have done it. I wasn't mature enough. I needed the confines of being in an office and sort of being told what to do. And I have guys on the team now, 22, 23, 24, working out of their house, different parts of the country, and we don't know when they're working. We know when they're working because we can tell because they're doing their job, but we don't watch them, 8 to 5. And that's an incredible amount of responsibility that I'm actually very impressed by some of what this generation has been able to do. And even the pandemic, as you mentioned, it's like I get guys that are sharing apartments and sharing houses together that will always be in the office. And then in the pandemic, we're like, hey guys, you got to take calls all day long in your house. I know there's 5 of you living together and you basically have no room, but go sort it out. And they did it. So I'm actually more impressed because like in what some of the teams have been able to accomplish. It's a hit or miss thing, as we all know. I mean, like some people aren't going to be able to do it. Some people are. But at age 22, 23, 24, 25, asking you to work virtually independent and do it on your own, I think if they can do it, they have a leg up from where I was.
Yeah, I don't. So yeah, right. Like, if I look at my life, like I slept most of high school. Like I did really well, but I slept through most of it. College was really unstructured, a lot of partying. I mean, look, it was the days where we were watching the movie Old School. So we were having a great time.
Yeah.
But then I get into the real world, and I remember the biggest thing that hit me was how exhausted. Like you get into the office before 8, right, and you're dressed up. You have to keep this face on, and in a suit, and you're there till 5, and then it's not over. There's usually something afterwards.
There's always something. Yeah.
Right, like a happy hour or a team event, and it took me. I remember like 3 weeks. It was brutal. I didn't even have time to come home, and at the time, I was young, so I was like, I can't even play my video games and enjoy them. I'm like, this, what I wanted to do when I was in college, I would come home from class. Yeah, I'm good. Let's hang out and let's drink, and I couldn't do it. But that set the stage for my work ethic later. I don't know how I would have attained that if I didn't have an office to go to.
Right. And that's what I mean. Like I was in the office for the first 10 years of my career, and then because of my age, and then it started to drift a little bit. So if I had, like you said, been 22, fresh out of college, and they said, hey, you graduated from college, next week you're just going to be in the same place you were and go to work every day, I don't think I would have done as well with it. So that's why I'm really impressed with what some of the guys are able to accomplish. And it's sort of easy to see for me because we've had some growth lately. So we do have some kids that are right in that age group, and you can see the ones that can really do it well and the ones that struggle a little bit. And I don't judge them for it. I can just see some adapt to it a little better than others.
Right. The different, right.
Yeah.
You're way ahead. You could definitely see it. They stand out much more.
Yeah, exactly.
You can't BS your way out of it. I think the other thing was, like, I remember corporate speak. Like, okay, everyone finds their word, finds their way to, you put on your corporate face. You're like, hi, good morning, happy Friday. I don't know, there's a culture in an office. I know the show The Office makes fun of it, but booking meetings, conference rooms, like the etiquette in the office, that goes with you as well. Anytime I enter a customer's office, I'm like, I know, check in with the front lady, but like,
yep,
you don't have any of that.
It's all gone. Yeah. Just yes, the pandemic forced it. The pandemic forced it on us in a lot of ways. You know what I mean? But culturally, we're just heading that way. I mean, like you go back not that long ago, like you said, I was going in an office. I was wearing, if not a suit, I didn't always have a tie on, but I had a sport coat, a dress shirt, dress pants. And then depending upon which part of the country, Boston, New York, or Philadelphia, I had a tie on. And if I went somewhere else, the tie came off. Nowadays, it doesn't matter unless I'm going into what I would call really one of the bigger banks that exists in the country. No one's wearing a tie, and most people aren't putting sport coats on. It's just a different, because they've been wrapped up in their house for 2 years.
I swore to myself I was one of those suits. Like I used to always have suits. Like every day I was like, this is my suit of armor. And now I'm like polos. Yeah. I never thought, to your point, it's changing. Work from home, you said it has changed everything.
Yep.
What is adapting to, like, what do you think salespeople have had to do to adapt? I know we talked about Gen Z, but in general, right? We can't. Some sellers maybe were better in person. They had that aura presence in a room. Some sellers could take people out for drinks. So how do you think that's changed everything?
I think it hurt the older generation a little more than the younger generation, because I think the older generation, and I'm stereotyping, so I'm putting everyone together.
This is the safe zone. You could say whatever you want.
Is that they did sell a little more on that relationship. Yeah, there was always a value you had to sell because your product had to do something or your service had to do something. But if I'd known you for 10 years, we're going to go to have a drink. That was that connection that you had. So then when you go to, strictly selling remote, it's okay. I got to sell the value. Really, they got to know what I do and why I do it. And if you're 25, 30, 35, whatever the age is, and you haven't been doing the relationship sale for 30 years, it's easier to adapt. The guy that's 50 or 55 is like, wait a minute, I've known Jimmy for 30 years. Jimmy always buys from me. Now I can only talk to Jimmy on video. It's not the same. Jimmy doesn't like me as much, because we're not hanging out. Not that they didn't have any value. But I think it was a harder turn from that perspective. I think two things. I think one of the things came out of it which is natural, which is there's only so much virtual selling you can do. People get tired of only virtual selling. People do want to see. Most people want to physically see people or interact and get to know you because they still want to buy from people that they like. And yeah, I can like you so much through a TV screen, but it's not quite the same as getting to really know you and meet you. So it proved the fact that most of us in sales knew, which is most businesses can work remote. When some of the leadership, you have to be in the office 5 days a week because you have to be. No, you don't. I mean, if you work at a restaurant, that was a different challenge. You work in movie theaters, totally different challenge. But the stuff we do, we've always known with technology we can make it work just about anywhere. It can be a little bit of a heartache from the travel perspective, but we'll make it work.
Yeah. What are some of the the little, I guess, intricacies or new? We'll call them, I hate the term, tips and tricks, right? Best practices that come with virtual selling in your mind. What have you seen?
It's a good question. I think we've entered a new world in some ways that I never ever would have seen, which is, the pandemic created obstacles that didn't exist before because it wasn't simply I'm not available, it was I'm uncomfortable. And you have no way to know who's comfortable and who's not comfortable. And that's really, really hard to figure out. Does the guy in Denver who's behind your $2 million deal, does he want to have lunch or does he not want to have lunch because he's afraid to see you? And then you're trying to figure out, is he afraid or does he just not like you? And that's entered a whole new level of selling that the only way to get the answers is to surround things even more. And what I mean by that is, yes, if you knew the guy, you had a relationship, but the standard scenario was, hey, who's my partner working the deal with me? Who's the ecosystem? Who else is there that I can figure out? Does this guy go see them? Does he talk to other people or is it just me? And that's something that I never, ever could have wildly imagined. It was simply the guy either would meet me or he wouldn't, and I could figure out. Now I got to figure out, is he vaccinated? Is he not vaccinated? Does his family have a history with this? Is there something else I don't know about? So that's number one, which is just a huge difference. And then the second thing, which sort of flies in the face a little bit, but it isn't, is I do believe most people want to see people. I do believe most people want to get out. And I think you have to push that a little bit. Until the person says no, you have to push a little bit. You can do one-on-one meetings. They don't have to be large, big scale, parties that we've done, even though I'll do them all day long. But I think people still buy from people that they like. So you've got to find.
Oof. Is that another one?
Yeah. I just think that you have to buy from people you like. So you got to find a way to connect with them. And there's only so much connecting you can do. I mean, I can tell where I live. 12 months into the pandemic in Boston, no one wanted to do another virtual event. And it wasn't because they didn't like people. They just were tired of, of virtual events. It was cold out and we'd been on the freaking, computer for 12 months.
Yeah. Yeah, you got it. And it's also like, it's like you said it, like three-dimensional, right? Like understanding when you had people in the office, I remember if I had a meeting, I could even go to that guy's, like another engineer, right, maybe on the team, and get some scoop, right? Like some tactics, right? If it was like, it felt like it was like Metal Gear Solid, or I was in the office and trying to get some more information from it. Oh, there's the head of procurement.
Right.
Like, I'm gonna go introduce myself because that's important. Oh, there's legal. Do we need any papers to sign? Right? You could really navigate your way. Now you're right. It's like, does this person like hello? Do they like me?
It's just hard. It's harder.
And you're right. To your second point, it's tougher to get that meeting. You want to get them in person, but how do you? And you don't want to, especially. And imagine as a female, I've had a few of my female friends and peers who are in sales, and it's that much tougher for them. They tell me, they share with me, it's tough for us to ask for meetings. You get the wrong idea.
Right.
And how can we just do that when everything is either lunch or coffee or dinner? There's no office to meet at.
I remain somewhat optimistic. I don't think we're going to go to 5 days back in an office. That's not what I mean. But I think there'll be some office days again for certain businesses. More for them from a collaboration perspective. Hey, we all work as a team, and most of us live. Now, it all depends where they live and what the office is. There's always different, parameters that didn't exist before. But I'm hopeful that like some businesses will go back in the office a couple days a week, so you can do what you're talking about. But because that challenge is real. What you just said, you go back a decade, there was an account I had, I would spend 1 day a week in that account, and what you just said is what I would do. I'd walk around, I'd see that guy, I'd see this guy, it would be there. That doesn't exist right now in most companies. It's just, and it's become harder because they're disparate. Like, everyone says, in sales, where's the headquarters? And I'm like, well, I don't really care where the headquarters is. I care where the people are. Like, who are we selling to, and how do we work together? And some of these accounts are like, well, 1 guy's in Colorado, and 2 guys are in Texas, and 3 are in Florida, and 2 are in Indiana. So who should cover the account? I'm like, oh boy, it's going to get fun. This is going to get fun.
Yeah, I have a few of those. Those are tough.
Yep.
So one big, I guess, best practice for me that I harp on often, or that I really highlight, is reading a room. Like, I feel like that was an art, right? Not just to read a room, but to manage a room and manage a meeting. And it's tough when you're a small square in a screen and looking at other squares, and half of them or most of them don't have their screens up, their cameras on. So what are your thoughts on room? How can someone, maybe some advice on someone if they haven't had the chance to be in field sales, how to develop that skill?
It's really hard what you said. You're right. What I mean is, like, when you're doing it like this, it's really hard, because being in the room was hard enough, but at least you could see mannerisms, and you could, if you weren't paying attention to the presentation, you'd be paying attention to the people in the room, and you could see what they were doing. Are they on their phone? Are they on laptop? It's easy to see that. You can't, in this world, so much harder. The closest thing we've been able to do, and this is risky because you run the risk of aggravating people, is asking people questions throughout the presentation to see if they're engaged. Because you got 6 people, I'm making it. You got 6 people, 1 camera on, 5 aren't on. If they could be reading their email, they could just be on another phone call with on mute for all you know. So, but if you ask a question and they don't answer because maybe they're either timid or maybe they don't know the answer or they don't want to be involved, you run the risk of aggravating them. But if you don't ask anything, you literally don't know if they're even engaged. And basic 101 stuff, like, and I catch myself in it all the time.
Let's be clear. To you, it's basic. So
no, well, this one's pretty basic, which is you got to ask the open-ended question. Like I often ask because I know the answer I want. I want a yes/no answer, but I really don't want the yes/no. I want to know what's going on. So if you ask a question of like, and I used to do this all the time. Does this make sense? Everyone says yes. Everyone just says yes.
Guilty that one.
Yeah, and you keep going. Whereas if you ask some kind of question of, in the space I'm in today with, cloud and disaster recovery and ransomware, we could present, for, 15 minutes. And if you ask the question, can you guys explain to me how you'd recover from ransomware today? Like that at least gets someone to, give me, there's no yes or no, there's something to it. I think reading the room virtually is harder because 2 things happen. Either you get very little participation, you get the yes/no answers, or you get one person who predominantly answers most of the questions. So that's why you have to call on people, but it's like I said, it's a little bit risky if you don't have someone in the account giving you some guidance to say, well, Bill isn't really important to this project. He's going to get invited. You don't care about Bill. But Susie's going to be on the call. You got to make sure she's involved. And if you don't know that, that's tough.
Yeah, I